Everyone. Good evening, Gail Boyle here. And obviously I'm one of the co-presidents with John Pritz of the Historical Society and one of the sponsors for this evening's program. We also want to let you know that the program is being simultaneously shown on LMC TV. So that's where the Zoom will also be seen. We especially want to thank the Mamaroneck Public Library for their tremendous community support and their support of the Mamaroneck Historical Society, and they're the co-sponsors for this evening's event. And tonight we welcome Dr. Darla Shaw, her husband Ben, and their old friend Jack Brewer. They're old friends because they all grew up in Mamaroneck and have been friends since that time. Darla and Ben Shaw are passionate about local history and especially about oral history, the power of people telling about their lives, their experiences, and growing up in Larchmont and Mamaroneck. So Darla will introduce you to Mr. Jack Brewer, and then we will hear his story. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Gail. I'm so happy to be back. Some of you might remember me. It was the 100th anniversary of the suffragettes last year, and I did a couple of programs on the suffragettes. Then I came back and I did a program on Gail Sheehy, the wonderful Mamaroneck author who wrote the Passages book. But today is really special. We're going to be talking to Jack Brewer, fourth generation of that iconic hardware and marina in Mamaroneck. Now, how did this come about? Well, I lived in Mamaroneck in the 50s and 60s. My husband, Ben, lived in here from the 30s to the 60s. He went to Chatsworth with Jack. He graduated in 1958 with Jack. So we twisted his arm a little, and here we are. And I want to say this before I introduce Jack. This is an amazing book that just came out by Mike Tripico, class of 1957. It's postcards from old Mamaroneck. Go on Amazon. Get this for your friends for the holidays. This is perfect. And in this, you will find a picture of Brewer hardware back in 1881. So Jack, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Now, the first thing I'd like you to do is to go way back to your great-great-grandfather. You know, where did your family have its roots? Where did they come from? Why did they come to Mamaroneck? And what did they do when they came here?
Okay. Well, I guess my great-great-great-grandfather was Thomas Brewer, and he came from England, where he had been an indentured harness maker for 8 or 9 years. And I think that was around 1840. And he came to New Rochelle and he met another guy and they formed a partnership and they moved to Mamaroneck and began making harnesses and that kind of thing that they're somewhere on the post road, I think where the sewerage plant is now, in that range, across from St. Thomas's maybe. They had a son, and that was R.G. Brewer, and he was a pretty smart guy, and he assembled a nice piece of property, the hardware store, the boatyard next door to it over to the Mamaroneck River, and some other parcels in Mamaroneck as well. And he also started a bank in Mamaroneck. And he was very successful. So years go by, and he has 3 children. He has my grandfather, R.P. Brewer, that's Reuben Pashine Brewer, and Depew Brewer, and Edith Brewer. And pretty soon the Depression comes, 1929, 1930, 1931. And all of a sudden, business is not so good, and the bank goes bankrupt, and the other properties they own, with the oil company, for example, where Mitchell's Oil was, that goes bankrupt as well. Everything goes bust, except for the parcel of the hardware store. That's all they have at that time left. That's probably 1938, 39, 37. My dad has graduated from Boston University, and he comes and he begins to work at the hardware store, and he loves it, and that's where he stays the rest of his life, is at the hardware store. My dad, when he was growing up, he had met Lavinia Weiberg, who grew up in Shore Acres, and they were schoolmates in Rhinebeck at Bellows, and from the time they were young kids, they grew up together, got married, and had myself and my sister as children, as offspring. So that's a very brief synopsis there of the history of my family. It goes back a long, long time. I believe the hardware store was actually started in 1878. And at that time, there was coal, oil, horse and buggies, things like that. The lumber got brought in by ship to the harbor and offloaded. Just an interesting time looking back at it. Ice was a big problem there in Mamaroneck Harbor. That it was much colder in the winter times then. And I understand that a fellow named Frank Demando used to actually blow up the ice. We would, with dynamite, blow up the ice so that these ships could get in to unload. And they had to get in and out fast because it would refreeze very quickly. And that certainly has changed over the years. I know when I first got involved in the boatyard, ice was still a problem, and we used to go out and break it up with a small boat. But that was, and even now, it's much less severe than it was then.
Okay, Jack, you talked about the business being very successful. And then the depression came, and then the banks and the business and everything had problems. Now, I remember when I was there was also a fire.
That's
What
right.
caused the fire, and how did that affect the business?
That was 1958, I believe, 57, 58, somewhere in that range. And that destroyed the lumber yard totally. It's a miracle the hardware store didn't burn up also. So that was a devastating loss for the hardware store. All of a sudden, their buildings for lumber, et cetera, was all gone, just totally wiped out, totally. So, but fortunately, the hardware store survived, and they continued to do a lumber business, but on a much smaller scale.
Yeah, your family showed such resilience. They just stayed no matter what. Your father is remembered as a very special man. What were these special qualities that people liked about him?
Yeah, he was pretty fantastic. He was dedicated to the store, and I just remember growing up. He'd go to work at 7 or 7:30 and come home at 7 or 7:30 at night. And a lot of times a customer might call up and say, gee, I ran out of a quart of paint. My dad would get in the car, drive down, open up the store, and get whatever the person needed. And I just have a lot of memories about going back with my dad after dinner for an hour or two and sweeping the aisles and sorting charge tickets and that kind of thing. My sister would come with me to also, and we would do that. And it was just part of my life growing up. So also every holiday and every vacation I had, I spent working at the store. Started out, I think, 75 cents an hour, as I recall. And it was just a great experience. But it was interesting because the hardware store was my dad's, period, the end. He loved it and he enjoyed it immensely. But as I going to college and I've always had an interest in business. I like business a lot. And I'd see him at his desk, and at his desk he'd have tons of papers, envelopes, pieces of paper, and this and that. And I'd look through these things and I'd see envelopes with checks in them that for one reason or another he hadn't deposited. And things like that just, what should I say, drove me crazy. Or I said, what the heck, why don't we deposit these checks? And it was just that it didn't concern him a heck of a lot. He wasn't interested in that. He would rather spend 5 minutes looking for a washer or a bolt or a screw down in the basement. That's just how he was. He was a very unusual man, a wonderful man, generous and kind, and hardworking. And money wasn't money, and I would say business wasn't really too important to him, other than the hardware store. That he loved the hardware store. That was his life.
Was he disappointed when you decided not to go into the business and take it over?
Well, in a way, I think he was. Yeah, I think he wanted me to go into business with him, but I think he knew that I wasn't going to be happy doing that. I had done it for years. I had worked for a year down in New York City at a bank. I didn't like that. I left. I enrolled at business school at Columbia because I wanted to get a broader experience. And so one day out of the blue, the phone rings and it's my dad. And he says, Jack, if I buy the boatyard next door, would you want to run that? And he says, I'll leave you completely alone. And I said, I thought about it for a day, called him back and said, yes, I would love that opportunity. That's terrific. There was one employee and a gal in the office. And the place was grossing $60,000 and making $10,000. And my father's accountant told him he was absolutely crazy to be buying this. I think he paid $125,000 for it. Mostly borrowed a note that the seller took back. But I think that this gave him the opportunity to regain some property that they had lost during the Depression. So I think that was important to him. And I also think more important, he wanted to be in business with me, but he didn't want me interfering with him in the store. That was his domain. And he didn't want a smart aleck kid, making suggestions and telling him how he should do this, he should do that, blah, blah, blah. So it really kind of worked out very, very well. When I got to the boatyard, there was no bathroom there. I mean, it was pretty plebeian, if you will. There was no bathroom. There was a potbelly stove, and that was it. But I was very lucky because the guy that was there, his name was Tony Marciniak, and he was a great teacher. And I asked Tony, I said, Tony, can you teach me everything that you know about this business? And he did. And slowly but surely, we did everything ourselves. We hauled the boats, launched the boats, painted the boats, painted the bottoms. Everything that had to be done, we did. And he was a great teacher, which I'm forever grateful. for all that he taught me. Meanwhile, my wife would come in and she would type up bills at night and stuff like that. So it was a great big effort, but it was wonderful. It was fun, and I loved it. It was just great.
Okay, now, before we talk more about the business closing and what happened after that, you had a pretty amazing mother too.
I did.
So let's give some credit to your mom and tell us about her.
A lot. Yeah, I was really fortunate because my mom and dad were both terrific people. My mother actually worked at Lord and Taylor in her very early days, and she worked for a lady named Dorothy Shaver, who was the president of Lord and Taylor a million years ago. And after that, my mother got very involved with the PTA, and I remember she would take the train to different meetings all around the place, all around wherever she was going, New York State. I had no idea. But my memories, of course, are I'm at Chatsworth Avenue School, and I remember very well my mother would leave us peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, or peanut butter and mayonnaise, I think she actually preferred. Oh. Sorry about that. And I would walk home at lunch. My sister would often join me, and we'd sit there, have lunch, and then walk back to school because my mother wasn't around. She was busy at the PTA doing whatever she did. But it was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience. And that's what we did up all through Chatsworth Avenue School.
It wasn't your mother, didn't she work for the town?
She did. She became the secretary to George Burchell, who was a town supervisor, which is like the mayor of the town of Mamaroneck. And she did that forever, for many, many, many years. And I think when she was 65, they had a retirement party for her at the old Washington Arms restaurant. I forget what it was called then. And we had this nice retirement party. It was just wonderful. And then she went back to work the next day for another 7 or 8 years. So she was a hardworking person. She made a great example for me growing up. Both my parents did. It was wonderful. They were hardworking.
Now, was she quite a swimmer?
She was, yeah, in her early days. Yeah, she grew up in Shore Acres, in one of the very early houses there at Shore Acres. And she would swim starting out from Guyon Creek and swim out through the harbor and out into the Sound. And I've been told that she would swim up as far as Playland and come back. Now, I don't know how true that is. It's hard to believe, but I know she loved the water and loved swimming.
Now, tell us about, you talked about the one marina and how you learned from that one marina and it grew. And I know you are so humble, but we don't need you to be humble now, because I read about you being the master of like all marinas on the East Coast or something.
Oh, yeah.
So just, tell us, how did this one little marina in Mamaroneck grow to this huge corporation?
Well, I was there, and as I had mentioned, Tony Marciniak is teaching me everything that he knows. And we changed the way the marina looked. We took the marine railway out. There was a marine railway when I first got there. So you hauled the boats on a railway, brought them up, and you used grease ties, and you put the grease on these skids and skid the boats by hand. And it was just brutal work. But that's how you move the boats around then. That was how it was done. So our first step was we removed the railway and we bulkheaded that, and we bought what they call an algonac hoist. And that cost $7,500, and we still have it today. It's been a great machine. It does a wonderful job. So we're building this boatyard, and I should add that I was lucky because at that time we had 20 boats in storage, and they were good quality boats, all wooden boats, and we gave people great service. So we would clean the boats thoroughly. When we finished working on them, we just took great care. And I remember Fridays and Saturdays scrubbing the interior of the boat, the head, the galley, everything, just making sure it was pristine. Sometimes putting flowers in the boat or a bottle of wine or something. Anything we could do to try and make the customer happy is what we did. And we were lucky because we had great customers from Larchmont Yacht Club, from American Yacht Club, from Beach Point Club, just wonderful customers. So pretty soon we had 14 people working there, and the yard's making, to me, pretty good money. We're doing very well. And I realized that even though I'm painting bottoms and I'm moving boats around, I come to realize that heck, I can hire other people that are doing this job better than I can do it by far. So I start looking around to see another opportunity, and I see an advertisement in the Wall Street Journal for a property up in Westbrook, Connecticut, and that one was Pilots Point Marina. And I don't know if anybody's been there, but Pilots Point Marina, when I first looked at it, was small. Had 110 slips, 15 acres of land and water. And this is a long time ago, and the price was $260,000. So I had $40,000, and I went down to a bank in bang, knocked on all the doors of banks, and I found one down in New Rochelle. I think it was Westchester Federal Savings and Loan at that time. And I met a guy, Mr. Phelan, Phelan, and he agreed to give me a large part of the purchase price. And it was 8% interest, 20-year note. Obviously, I signed personally for it, of course, which didn't mean anything. And I also managed to get a second mortgage on Post Road. So I had enough money to buy this property, and I needed to have somebody run it. So fortunately, breaking ice in Mamaroneck, I had met a fellow named John McMahon who worked at Directors next door. And he and I would be out breaking ice. And John was a great guy. He had gone to Brown, smart guy. He just liked boats. And I said to John, John, if I buy this property up in Westbrook, Connecticut, would you like to run it? I would like you to run it just like it was your own place. And so he and his wife Sherry, they moved from Mamaroneck up to Westbrook and took and ran it. And I would spend maybe one day a week building floats up there, whatever it was, and the rest of the time I was working at Post Road. And so that was a beginning. We had a couple of I'll call it rules. Money couldn't be spent unless we had it. And we paid all of our bills within 10 days, period, the end. Never an exception. If we didn't have the money for something, we just did not buy it. So we'd get 2% from our suppliers. We'd get very good service from our suppliers because we paid so well. And John did a great job there. He was wonderful. And a couple of years go by, I don't know, 2 or 3 or 4, and another property is up for sale. And this was in Brantford, Connecticut, Bruce and Johnson's Marina. And that was $800,000. So I had $200,000 at that time and was able to put together a deal to buy it. The owner of the property had bought this marina for his son. Son was named Fred Bruce, and the son really didn't like it. He wasn't good at it. It wasn't for him. So the father was anxious to sell it. So here I am, and the father's thrilled to get rid of it. And he agrees to stay on the note and also hold a second mortgage, and I'm able to make a deal for it. And that worked out just well, very, very well. And it just kind of went on and on from there. It took
How
me
many marinas did you actually acquire at the end of your career?
27.
Okay.
And that was probably 35 purchases. Some purchases we blended into a property. We'd have a Palace Point, north, east, and south. We'd have a
So
Sakana.
what was your range of states that you had marinas in?
We had a marina in Maryland, and then New York up to Maine.
Okay. And you said that your sort of slogan was the customer is always right. It's always about the customer. Now, did you get that from your father?
Absolutely. I got it from my father, definitely, but also in Mamaroneck was a small property. And to make any money, we had to do service work, and we had to do it well, because we didn't have a lot of slips. We didn't have a lot of storage. It was a small property.
Right. Now, I heard the slogan for the hardware was, if you can't find it here, you don't need it. Was that the slogan from your father?
Kind of.
And there was nothing that anybody came in for that he could not find. Is that true?
He would endeavor to find it no matter what. That part is true. Did he sometimes not have something? Of course, but he would try his hardest to satisfy the customer.
Now, when I was doing, research on your background, you not only acquired this great number of marinas that were considered like derelict, and you turned them around with this service
Right.
and all, but you were the first to come up with the idea that a marina is a destination, not just a place to dock a boat. Can you explain that?
Yeah, Ken. We wanted the marina to be a family place. We didn't want it to be a dump or a place with that wasn't nice. We didn't want it to be a place where the father would go down and go fishing and come back, and the wife wouldn't want to go there. So we endeavored to make our properties attractive and nice as best we could. So we put swimming pools in almost all of our properties. We would plant a lot of grass, a lot of trees, a lot of bushes. We would landscape. We just tried to make them attractive and nice. We'd have playgrounds for the kids. Whatever we could do to make the place attractive. The swimming pools were an amenity. And at a lot of our restaurants, places, we had restaurants. We probably had 15 or 16 restaurants, none of which we operated, but we leased them out. And it was just a great adjunct for the customer. And Darla, another nice benefit of what we had was we would tell a customer, okay, you're traveling up to Narragansett Bay. If you have any problems, stop in at one of our properties and we'll treat you very, very well. And so that began to be a program. We call it our preferred customer card. And a year-round customer got 6 free nights dockage at any of our properties, and a seasonal customer got 2 free nights, and they all got discounts on fuel. And this was a wonderful, wonderful thing. It cost us nothing, but the goodwill that it engendered was fantastic.
Yeah. Now, could you explain a little bit about like the demise? All of a sudden, it seemed like the hardware closed and nothing has really appeared. And, how come this happened, it seemed to people so quickly? Because there was shock among the community. I mean, Brewers is not there anymore.
Correct. So when I was getting on in age and trying to plan for my family, I wasn't as sharp as I had been, and I looked for an opportunity to perhaps sell the company. And after 2 or 3 years, I had what I considered to be a great opportunity. I took it, and I became a co-founder of a company called Safe Harbor Marinas. And I sold everything, including the hardware store, except for 2 marinas I owned up in Maine. Those I kept for my son. I sold them to him, basically. So the hardware store was a whole different kind of business for Safe Harbors. They put a gal in there who did a great job, outstanding job running it. But after 2 years or 3 years, I guess it was 2 years, Safe Harbors just decided, hey, this is not for us. We're going to close it and do something else with the property. And that's exactly what they did. They closed it. Painful, very painful. But you know, the hardware store was not making any money at all. It was not a good, no longer a good business there in Mamaroneck. There was Home Depots. It was just no longer. There was the internet, and it really wasn't working out. So that's what happened. It closed. I can't believe the number of people that came in and were shocked at it, and this and that. But a lot of them, in retrospect, said, "Yeah, I'm buying stuff at Home Depot. I'm buying stuff from Amazon," and I get it. I was talking with my daughter today, and she's buying stuff from Amazon. She gets it the next day. It's just a changing world.
Right. Yeah, I'd like to go back a little bit and then we'll open up for questions and all. What do you remember? You talked about Chatsworth, and I know we had talked about Dr. Long, but what about the junior high and the high school? What were you active? What do you remember about going through the school system in Mamaroneck?
Well, my favorite thing, I would say from the time I was in 7th grade on, was playing basketball. I loved basketball. I also remember before that, back in 2nd grade, I think Miss Fortune was my teacher. And I remember I bought some firecrackers, and I can remember putting them in my desk and selling them. And Miss Fortune finally came over to the desk, opened it up, and she sees these firecrackers. And I got in a little bit of trouble for that, but it was something I remember very well. So from junior high on, though, I'm playing basketball every day, all I can, loving it. I got thrown out of the Boy Scouts because I would go back at night and open up the gym, turn the lights on, and play more basketball. And so that just occupied all my free time playing basketball. I loved it. Before that, I had a paper route. That was a great little business. I enjoyed that a lot. It's fun. And that's my history of Mamaroneck. It was a wonderful school.
Right. I wanted to end and just ask you 2 questions. One is, you have a lot to do with the environment and clean water and, different agencies. What can you tell us about that? And also, what advice would you give an entrepreneur today with all of these years of wisdom that you have acquired?
Well, with the environment, obviously, being in the business that I was in, it was very important that we have clean water. So we did everything we could to ensure that the water was clean. Planting grass, putting in systems when you wash the bottom of a boat so that the bottom wash wouldn't go back into the sound. all kinds of things like that are what we did. In Connecticut, they had a program where they would award an environmental award for a clean marina. And all of our marinas in Connecticut passed that. They didn't have those things up in some other yards in Rhode Island or Massachusetts or Maine. But if they had, we would have done it. We would have made sure.
And, what about being an entrepreneur? What did you find was the most important guideline that you followed?
The most important guideline I would have is just try and find something that you're passionate about. I was not passionate about boatyards when I first started out, but I loved business. I liked working hard. I loved that. And I just would say stick to it. If you find something you really love, stick to it, give it your best. I built this business through good luck and hard work. And what is it they say? The harder you work, the luckier you get. And I think that's a pretty good slogan for anybody young.
I like that. Very good. Okay, we're going to have stories and questions now. And Ben is going to just tell 2 short stories about John Brewer. Okay.
Yes, dear. Jack.
Hey, Ben.
All right, I'm just moving over. So anyway, Jack, all I remember, there were 2 things that I remember. Dad, and we used to hang out at your house.
Yes.
And it was a motley group of guys, but we were very tight. And your dad came down one time, and I get a little mixed up on it, but he came down one time and he says, you guys like to hang out here. He says, you need a place to hang out. And he said, he gave us a proposal. If I give you the material, would you guys make a rec room? And we all pitched in, and we made that rec room. He provided the material, and your place was the hangout for our gang.
Yeah.
And the second one, and I've heard this from some of my friends or our friends about Mr. Brewer. I have come into the store, Mr. Brewer, I need this here. And he would take a look at it, and he would sort of cock his head back, and he'd take a look at it. He goes, follow me. We go downstairs through a bunch of aisles, and he'd reach up on top of the shelf, and he'd grab this. Is this what you're looking for? Absolutely. And the other thing was paint. If you're a marine paint, you could always rely on Brewer's Hardware for marine paint and service. Now, always your dad's staff was super. They were a chip off the old block, if I say. But anyway, those are my true memories. And also you playing basketball. All right, I'll turn this over to Darla.
Okay. Gail, do you have questions?
All right.
Well, let me just say
Comment?
this. If you have any questions, put them on the chat sign and I will assign them, and you can speak directly with Jack if you want. But Jack, I have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
When you were buying the marinas initially, all right, when you first got it, and for instance, when you bought the Branford Marina,
Yeah.
how old were you?
Oh, Jesus. 20, probably 30.
So you were a youngster still.
Yeah, I was pretty young.
That's amazing. That's very impressive.
it's an interesting thing. It took me 50 years to buy 27 marinas. So if that puts any I don't know, time in it. It just took a long time to do it. I started young, but it took a long time.
But, you know, I'm just sitting here listening to you tell the story of how it developed. And it basically started with nothing, all right? With something that you had to fix.
Yeah,
And then you fixed it, was successful, and then got another one and fixed it, and on and on and on. I mean, that's a very impressive career and you know, choices that you made.
well, I was very lucky. You know, probably the luckiest thing for me was that I managed to find good people, great managers. And I ran the place very transparently so that every manager was responsible for his property. The financials were wide open. Everything was wide open, period. And I paid my managers very well, but they earned it. An incentive system is wonderful, and they all participated. If the company's business went up 10%, their pay went up 10%, and everything was wide open. All the books were wide open all the time.
Wow.
Good choices.
Yeah,
Couple of other comments we're getting.
Yeah, good.
Lori Bartels, we still sorely miss having Brewer's Hardware store here. All right, that's a recurrent statement from a lot of people in town. I'll tell you that.
yeah.
Dean Clark says, no question, just a huge thank you for guiding me into 2 significant careers. You were a wonderful landlord when I had a sailboat dealership in your Mamaroneck yard, and even was a great neighbor on Old Long Ridge Road. I guess that's up in Stamford.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Yep, I lived in North Stamford for 47 years.
Robert Bierman says, I started at Brewer's in 1974 and worked with John and even you, Jack, a few times. I changed light bulbs on the top of some masts when needed quickly.
Wow, terrific. I love it.
Gail, you've got a question? I don't know where Gail is, but she did have a question.
She's
Yes, so unmute.
Muted.
Yeah. Hi. I've only lived here 36 years, so I can't really, hark back to the old days, but I know I spent a lot of time in Brewers besides for my housewares. I spent a lot of time buying marine supplies. I even bought boots and raincoats and whatnot. And I guess I'm just wondering, did your dad always stock the marine section as deeply as he did, or did he really turn to the marine supplies when you opened the marina next door?
No, Gail, he was ahead of that. He probably 10 years before he bought the marina next door, he had gotten started in the marine business, selling marine supplies, and he was lucky at that time because the boat business was growing by leaps and bounds, and Brewers became the only place around to really have a good stock of marine supplies, paints, etc. And he capitalized that and built that up very well.
Yeah, I couldn't believe what people came in for, because it would be an education while you were there, because the marine section was as deep as anything else.
Absolutely.
As far as, the little screws and the little, the guy next to you was coming in to get something for a sailboat, and it was really, and the maps. I bought my marine maps there.
Charts, yeah, right.
Charts. Sorry, wrong word.
Yes.
Jack, we were talking just before we started, and you had some comments on another family business in Mamaroneck, Walters. So you said you wanted to tell us your memories of Walters.
My memories of Walters was really just how wonderful it was, and trying to get there at lunch and have a hot dog or two without getting in trouble at school. Because as I mentioned earlier, you were not allowed to get out of school at lunchtime. So you had to sneak out. And I think Ben mentioned you could hold up your fingers and they would get you 2 or 3 hot dogs and have them ready for you.
And they were 5 cents a piece then, right?
I think 15 cents is what I
Oh,
remember.
15 cents a piece. Okay.
Yeah. Or 2 for 25 cents.
Right, that was it. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, are there any other questions?
Yeah,
Stories?
Joanne Clementoni, do you want to speak? You can unmute yourself.
Oh, I'll read what I wrote. I was always able to find what I needed from the vast stock and wonderful staff. I loved the smell of the store, but more than anything, I loved the floors and often thought if these floors could talk, what a story they could tell.
Oh, yeah.
Boy,
They were the original floors.
that's right, Joanne. Yeah,
Yes, yes.
they were.
Yeah, I would just look at them, just stare at them after I finished shopping.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, and every once in a while you'll find another hardware store that's been around forever and it'll have a similar smell to it.
Mhm.
But it's
Yeah.
a dying thing.
It's funny, before you guys closed, I had a couple of oil lamps, all right, old from 1900. And the chimneys were broken. And I said, well, let me give it a shot. And I don't remember the name of the fellow that helped me, but he looked down, he looked at the ceiling and said, follow me. Just like you were saying your father did.
Yeah.
Right. And we went down in the basement and moved a bunch of boxes, and lo and behold, they're the chimneys. Oh, and a variety of, not just one size, of different sizes, different styles. It was wonderful.
Very nice.
Mr. Bierman had some stories.
Yes, hi, how's everyone doing today?
Jenny Daniels, do you want to say something? Why don't you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I'd love to say a couple of things. First of all, I understand my mother-in-law, Arlene Kelsey, went to school with your father, John at Bellows.
Oh, really? Wow. That's a riot.
And I think they were in the same class.
Huh.
And I know she always talked about John as being a really great person.
Oh, that's so
And
nice to hear.
That's good to hear.
The other thing was that my husband, Bert Daniels,
Oh, sure.
spent a lot of time in the hardware store. It was like a second home to him.
Yes, I know Bert. Yes.
He loved being in the store. I mean, he thought it was the greatest place in the world. And there was any excuse to go, well, gee, I got to go get something for the boat. Where else to go?
We always bought paint for the house there as well. Every time we needed to buy new paint, we went there for the house.
So it was a great place. As I say, I think it was his second home.
Thank you, Jenny. Robert, you have some
Hi,
stories?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
So yeah, I started in '74 building wheelbarrows and barbecues. I was a teenager. I was one of the first teenagers that was hired by John and by JJ.
Yes. Wow. Wow.
And I remember so many different things. One of the things was I was actually pretty good with electrical, with tools and electrical. Those were the main 2 areas that I manned. And your dad, John, would always, when somebody would ask me, hey, what is the right tool for doing this? Or what's the right way to hook up this circuit? And I would tell them.
Wow.
2 minutes later, they'd be over at John asking, how do you do this? And instead of John telling them how to do it, he would say, oh, go talk to Bob. And that was so great because, people wouldn't believe, this young snot-nosed kid. But he really gave me that confidence
Very nice.
and to really build up. And I ended up building a lot of the displays. Like, remember when oil got really expensive and we
Sure.
started selling pellet stoves?
Yes.
I built a faux fireplace using the faux bricks display to display them.
I'll be darned. Wow.
And I remember one fun case, cordless drills were a new thing. And I was like, these things are really going to sell. And I struck a deal with Cotter and Company to get like this large shipment, like more drills than we normally would ever sell. It was like 60 or 80 drills, which is a lot of drills on a reduced price, paid in 90 days. And JJ was furious with me. Like, how could I go ahead and order that much? That was a lot of money.
Yes.
A lot of stock. And I said, JJ, trust me. Because I also ordered a whole set of drill bit sets. Now, the drills we made almost no money on. It was a loss leader. Cotter Company was giving a sale and a discount. The drill sets we made a fortune on. This was my first year going to college. So I actually left the store in September, just before the sale. He called me up and said they had to place an additional order because they ran out.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And they were making a fortune because they were selling so many drill sets with the drills.
That's wonderful. I love this.
But the one story two, one similar to what was just told regarding the part. This person needed a top to a 1958 percolator, the little glass top.
Yes, I remember those. Oh.
And I'm like, John, I think, I always call him Mr. Brewer. JJ, I would call JJ. John, I'd call Mr. Brewer. I think we have these, but do you know where? And he goes, yeah, down in the boiler room.
That's right.
Which is
Yes.
downstairs, around the corner, through this like little opening that you have to duck your head. And sure enough, we had the glass top to a 1958 percolator. But the other thing, so he was such a nice guy, but don't mess with him. Somebody came into the store. This big guy came into the store and stole a chainsaw right off the counter and walked out the door with it. He went out, tackled the guy. Now, mind you, he was not a young man at that time.
That's right. He was not. I remember that as well, that story. Yeah.
He tackled the guy, and this guy was absolutely silent. He just was on the ground, hands pinned. Police came, he started mouthing off. He just knew not to mouth off to John. It was so amazing to see him just like respond and react so quickly.
Yes.
And your comment about how dedicated, I mean, I was often there 7 o'clock in the morning, opening up. And there were times if we had a customer, we stayed until that customer was done.
That's right.
We didn't close the store and kick people out. We stayed until the customer was done. And store closed at 6 and we'd be there till 7:30.
Yeah, whatever it took. Yes.
And so it was just such a great experience. And it was my first job. And I was there for about 6 years.
Wow.
And so it's something that even today has had an impact. And I learned a lot. Like when I built that faux brick thing for the pellet stoves, because I was a young kid, a lot of the tradesmen who used to come to the store I'd ask them, hey, how do you do this? And they would show me.
Yeah.
And so I learned how to do faux brick from one of the local tradesmen.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to kind of relate that. It was just such a great experience. I loved working there. It was such a great place. I remember putting in the intercom system and doing some newfangled things that got your father all wound up a few times.
Okay, Lori, we have.
So Lori just wants to say thank you for this delightful interview. Nice to learn more history about Brewers. Cheers.
Great.
And the Zurbachs, I personally have an emotional attachment to the items I purchased at Brewers. I remember fondly the experience I had there every time I used them.
It's great.
Okay, well, if we have no more questions, it's almost 8 o'clock, and Jack, you were delightful. You took
Absolutely.
us through 5 generations of people who have dedicated their life to serving the public in such an important way and have had such an impact on Mamaroneck. It must feel good to hear all of these stories from people about your family and the good they did in the town.
Just wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Jack.
Thank you. Wow.
Jack, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Good night.
Be well.
Good night, all.
Happy holidays.
One thing, can you